Hi, everyone. I'm Gwen Callahan, the co-director of the HP Lovecraft Film Festival, and I am joined for a Q&A with the crew of Dream Eater, feature film at the festival, which won the Best Feature Award. I said that really weird. So Dream Eater, the winner of the Best Feature Award, the HP Lovecraft Film Festival. We have in one window Drakulic and Mallory Drumm, and in the other window Alex Lee Williams, who are you guys are all the co-writers and co-directors of this film, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah.
Mallory and Alex are Mallory and Alex in the film.
Yes, we are.
That feels like a sort of not a time-honored tradition, but it seems like a common thing in like sort of reality-based films. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to use your own names?
Yeah, for sure. I think once it was kind of figured out that we were going to be in the movie, which wasn't initially the first plan, we did have actors kind of signed on, but then some funding fell through and all that fun stuff. And when we decided that we were going to jump into the roles, I think as not like actors first, it kind of just helped to like keep our names the same. And knowing that we were probably going to ad lib a bit and like really just wanting to kind of keep that chemistry, it kind of just felt right to keep it as Mallory and Alex, and would have just, I think, like kind of really fostered that like ad libbing and just kind of experience, at least on my end. I don't know how you feel the same way, Al.
Yeah, no, it was very much that. And then also the added bonus to that is, like you mentioned, the time-honored traditions. Like, oh, great, we get to sort of like an homage to all the other, found footage movies that did the same thing. Like, it seemed like the right thing to do.
Nice. Can you guys, because doing a found footage movie of cosmic horror is like two really hard things to do right, and I feel like you guys nailed both of them, at least for me. Not, I guess I am a found footage fan. I just am very picky about the found footage that I like. And so much of it just feels kind of like a cover for low budget and low skill. And in this case with Dream Eater, it is clearly there's a lot of skill and attention that is put into every single shot that you make, because some of the shots you get are just must have taken so much planning. For example, when Mallory falls down the stairs with the camera, without killing herself, like that kind of thing. But I appreciate that you also use some of the still cameras that were in the cabin, and just things like the attention to detail, like the environment outside with the snow and the cabin. There's a lot to unpack here, but I guess back to my main point of cosmic horror and found footage. Why?
It's funny, I think what we really kind of started with this core story first, this kind of like entity that now enters people and their psyches through their dreams and through their sleep. And then from there, as we were kind of crafting the story, obviously found footage came partly from a budgetary limitation, but at the same time, it was also a way of getting really intimate with the characters, of kind of breaking down that fourth wall, so to speak, and really getting into the nitty gritty of these moments within the relationship that are a little bit more kind of like behind closed doors, especially because of the nature of documenting somebody's, parasomnia, which is, again, a very intimate thing you do for, your sleep clinicians and things like that. So I think what really happened was the story first was this cosmic horror kind of psycho horror drama. And then once we started crafting the story, we felt that found footage would really suit it well. And we hadn't really thought of many times that had been done before. So we thought this was kind of the perfect opportunity to do that. And then with like the isolated cabin, you're out in the dark, you're out in the middle of the woods, you got the blanket of stars above you. It just really did feel like the perfect, especially in the middle of winter, it really did feel like the perfect setting to kind of merge those two, the cosmic horror with the found footage. And we just found as we were developing it, we were like, oh yeah, this totally intrinsically works. And within the script writing phase, like we were writing in camera movements, we were writing in jump cuts, things like that right within the script. So it was cool. This was one of the first projects we did where the script itself developed as the shooting script because of the nature of the found footage format. So it just kind of like really intrinsically worked, and we just found like, yeah, it was kind of like peanut butter and chocolate. You know what I mean?
Nice. And it really is kind of, I mean, it makes sense that it became your shooting script because the camera is essentially Mallory. Like we're looking through her eye point of view through everything and then hearing her voice coming out of it. So I'm I already know the answer to this because I talked to you in person at the festival, but can you tell us a little bit about how you accomplished all these shots with Mallory's voice like just right there?
Yeah, essentially it was me and our DP, Michael Caterina, like glued to the hip, like just one another. Like whatever Mike was doing, I was doing, and whatever I was doing, Mike was doing. So it was very much just like right on each other. And like, in the scene when Mallory kind of goes through the door and falls, we actually did the Foley for that first. And I remember Mike was sitting in the cabin and he watched me bound through the door and then fall, and our sound guy capture all that, and he's just like, crap, well now I got to have the camera come in the same way you did. And it was very much just this like, yeah, like literally being almost glued to the hip with one another and just doing everything together, so that it really, and for me too, it kind of helped as like the character of Mallory, kind of really feeling like I was committing to like actually being like the documentarian. So that's kind of how we accomplished a lot of that.
It was cool too to watch our director of photography. He really embodied the character himself. Like he had a lot of input and suggestions where he thought, okay, cool, like I think we should shoot it this way based on her kind of mental state at this point, or her level of fear or anxiety. So it was really cool because you could see them on set really kind of like feeding off each other, to the point to what Mallory just said. I think it was the stair fall. Mallory didn't need to fall. Our DP just needed to fall, but Mallory was like, no, 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 we're in this together. We're already on like day 8, so she fell with him. And then after we called cut, he was like, why did you fall? She's like, come on, man, we're in this together, right? So it was very cool. Like the character of the camera really did, I think, come through as its own character, and not just so much the way of actually getting the film made. You know what I mean, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, it makes it so much more dynamic. And then the couple times that we do see Mallory on camera, it feels like, ooh, we get to see the
Yeah.
behind the ring.
Curtain back,
Yeah,
right?
which
Yeah.
is pretty fun. So which did you prefer, being behind the camera or in front of the camera?
Oh, behind the camera for sure. Yeah. It was, I'll be honest, like it was a struggle for me to like in front of the camera. And I mean, like, thank God for Alex. I think 100% made me a better actor on set, and he just made me so comfortable. And it was so amazing to have him with me doing this. Like, if it wasn't for Alex, I wouldn't be doing this. But no, I would much rather be behind the camera for sure.
And Alex, are you an actor normally? Like, do you wear all the hats all the time, or was this the first time you were
It's
wearing the actor?
it's the first time I've acted in a feature. I act in a lot of our shorts and stuff, usually just because of budgetary constraints. And
And
I
because
I
it's
do
so good.
I do enjoy being in front of the camera. I love being behind it. Like I'm obsessively like, meticulous about shots and pacing, and like, because I'm obsessed for us shooting for the cut itself, because we are also the editors of the film, even though we go under a pseudonym, Vigo Vasquez, just because our names would be all over the movie too much, so we came up with this little silly name that Jay and I share. But I really do enjoy being in front of the camera, and I think it's because, and with this movie, for as an example, when we lost our ability to have some great actors that we're going to be working with soon in the future, and we had to do it ourselves, it was like, okay, let's go for like, let's write all the stuff that we know that Actra wouldn't have allowed us to do, because we'd have to pay too much money, and we'll do that ourselves. Like, we were very much like, no, let's go. Like, I walked so much through the snow in bare feet so many times throughout this film,
Full
And
frontal in the middle of winter.
I opted for the full frontal nudity because I was like, this is gonna be crazier. Like, that's just gonna look wild. So let's just do that. Me under the house, like totally nude. Like, that's awesome. Come on, let's do that. So yeah, I'm not like an actor by trade, but I do enjoy doing it, especially with our friend group and our crew, because just like at the HP Lovecraft Film Festival with Benson and Moorhead, make movies with your friends. So it's like just Mallory said too, acting alongside her, she's my best friend. It was amazing because it was just all about comfort. And then, you know, it's like, oh, this is how pro actors do it. They get into that mindset of just pure comfort somehow without having their best friend acting across from them. So long answer to, yeah, I act sometimes.
Are you all Lovecraft fans?
Yeah, very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was introduced late to Lovecraft. Like Jay, I had heard the word a bunch of times and I had seen Lovecraft films, but I didn't know what that meant and who the writer was. And then when Jay introduced me to him and educated me on over the course of the last decade, I've become an absolute lover. And I didn't realize I already loved cosmic horror. Like, that is the thing. The fear of the unknown to me is the thing that makes horror horror. So I didn't even realize that that was like at the core of the thing that I loved about scary films.
Yeah, honestly, Lovecraft is kind of like this endless font that you can just draw from constantly, and really just get, you know, really creative with things, because, you know, like, it's kind of those like pillars of the unknown, right? It's like the ocean, the cosmos, the human psyche, what happens after death, different dimensions, things like that. These are all things that are inherently unknown to people, and it's part of our human condition. And it's usually these are things I think that'll remain mysteries for as long as we're a species. So it's really cool because you can really, it's a very cool sandbox to play in, because I think the possibilities are endless. And so it's just interesting because no matter what we do, there's always a Lovecraft kind of like angle to it, a Lovecraft edge. And yeah, it's just, honestly, it's a very fun kind of clay to model, so to speak, in terms of the types of stories and lore that you can kind of create and then put your own spin on, right? Because that I think is inherently Lovecraftian. It's like it's meant for everybody to participate in and further the mythos as they see fit while playing within that, you know what I mean, that kind of sphere.
Yeah, we call it like open source.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally open source. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's always fun for me to see you know, original films where people have kind of taken all these themes and elements and ideas that Lovecraft has kind of birthed out into the world and put their own spin on it and made them modern and applicable to now, rather than this. Sometimes in the fandom there's this like kind of fanatical desire to have everything be period of like when Lovecraft
Yeah.
wrote, which I get the appeal, because there is something, I mean, he basically branched the gothic horror and the modern horror, and there's kind of a magic in that moment. But I really enjoy seeing the films that people have created that are original stories, just kind of drawing on that, as you said, the well of kind of elements and themes that Lovecraft kind of brought to the forefront. um,
Well, it's actually, to add to that, you know, what was fun with this was, to your point, we thought to ourselves, well, if the ancient ones kind of predate humanity, well, then human mythology, couldn't that be then informed by actually the elder gods, right? So maybe Greek mythology, they were misinterpreting the gods of Olympus as actually these slumbering elders that are, you know, at the bottom of the ocean or living in the cosmos or whatever that is. So it was fun because we did a play on Greek mythology and actually pivoted it to be, well, it's actually Lovecraftian. So it was cool. It was almost like jumping back before Lovecraft's time and then bringing it into the modern era. So like that was also really fun to do, because you're actually like, well, technically anything now can be Lovecraft, as long as you look at it through the, you know, viewpoint of, well, these things predate humanity and actually are, you know, the things that are governing us, so to speak, or infiltrating our dreams or our psyches or whatever that is, right? They've been terrifying us for aeons, you know.
Totally. We do talk about how once you come to love Lovecraft, you kind of tend to see everything through that lens.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that question. I have a question that I'll ask you at the end of the Q&A. Try to remember the question. Okay. Let's talk about location, because it seemed like a perfect location, and it was like, it seemed rather remote and freezing cold. Like, it looked cold, everyone looked cold. It made me cold.
Very cold.
Thousands of pounds.
Like the house was amazing with the crawl space and everything. And
yeah, when we were at the festival, I remember Aaron saying, when he ever talks to like independent filmmakers, the first thing he always gives them a piece of advice is like, write to a location you have, because you could be pleasantly surprised of how expensive locations can be when you're making a movie. And we basically kind of did that ourselves with this film, and it was a piece of property that belongs to my family. And I had shown Jay about like 9 years ago this property, and like right away in his mind you could already see it clicking. And then a few years later I brought up Al, and then it was just like, okay, we have to do a movie up here. And initially we were going to film it in October because we really wanted to do kind of more of like a fall setting. But again, making movies is making movies, and things come up. And so we had to push it to March. And it just so happened to be like one of the largest snowfalls that area in Quebec had, it's northern Quebec in Canada, had received. And so like the first 2 days of pre-pro were essentially just us shoveling like the merry-go-round from out of the snow, a path to the crawl space, like a path to the back, and like everything was under 14, 12 feet of snow. And I remember like 2 days, I think, before we went up, we were like, we should buy snowshoes, because we don't know how we're going to film half the stuff that we have out in the woods if we don't have snowshoes. And like, yeah, so
yeah, no,
walk
and talks that we wrote turned into snowshoeing and talks. Like we just needed to, otherwise you sunk into snow up to your chest. Like, it was wild.
Yeah.
There's an adorable photo of our DP and our audio guy, who they both fell through in their snowshoes through all the snow, and they're both like submerged, just laughing so innocently. And just it's independent filmmaking in its natural state.
Oh,
funny
my
though,
goodness.
As indie filmmakers, I think you're always looking at every location of like, what can I shoot here?
Oh, it was literally, we're all
shot. Yeah, what film could suit this location, right? You're always doing that. But then as soon as Mallory showed us this, it was like, oh my God, like this is just dying to be in a horror film.
We're supposed to be there, like enjoying, just like, let's have a weekend away. We're literally got the cameras and we're avoiding relaxing at all costs. We're like, and then they come out of this crawl space. Imagine this crawl space, and they're standing in the corner over there. Like, it's, yeah. We will milk every property.
For some people, that's fun.
Exactly. That's relaxing to us.
It massages your brain in a way that
exactly
sitting around and reading.
The Cthulhu tentacles just massaging our brain, thinking about
that's, when truth is stranger than fiction. So 100%. Who knows?
Did, right?
Like, are we in the movie right now talking about
it?
It was true. It was all So for Alex and Mallory, the storyline is about this couple who he has parasomnia, where he sleepwalks and doesn't really remember things. And she's trying to kind of help him figure out what's going on. And he doesn't really seem all that invested in it, because they're poor. They're po.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship dynamic, and kind of that there's like a second thread that goes through this film where you start to see that maybe their relationship is not all that healthy?
Yeah, like the relationship between us was very much inspired by like an amalgamation of different either relationships that we've either experienced in the past or new people. Like, we were able to draw on real people that we know and like talk in scene when we were trying to figure out the dynamic of like, remember like this. So to give it real believability, between us two, because Mallory and I are very close and we were great friends. So having to translate that into a romantic relationship, but also an aged romantic relationship that did feel believable in its weatheredness, was tough. But we did that for months. We went over the script so many times, just doing table reads over and over and over, trying to figure out how this is going to feel believable for the audience. Because also talking about found footage movies and like how to do it wrong, in my opinion, is not having characters that you actually want to root for right out of the gate. So it was important also to make them believable, and especially someone like Alex, who's difficult. We'll just call him difficult. But you want to root for him. You don't, like, there were so many ways in early read-throughs where I would read it and it was like, oh, he's just an asshole. And there's so many times where we were like previewing the final cut and we're like, oh my God, Alex is such a dick, because I'm so not that guy. But it was important because we all have either been in those relationships or have seen those relationships where someone just can say something so snarky, but it kind of rolls off the person's back. And that was important to show Mallory's resilience in their relationship, so that the climax of the film and the beginning of the third act, when it all starts to really come apart at the seams, feels really real.
And yeah, to that point, as much as it was inspired by Lovecraft, and as much as we wanted to make a cosmic horror, just as much wanted to make a film about real abusive, toxic dynamics within relationships that people can find themselves in. This was talked about at the panel. Somebody asked a question where they were like, what informs ideas like this? And the answer we gave was, at least for part of us, it's real, lived, and observed trauma. And that was something that we wanted to have. We wanted to be making a comment on how this demonic entity that is kind of infiltrating Alex and taking control is also something that is inherently inside him, that was put there through trauma and through his inability to reconcile his past. So, there's a moment early in the film where Alex slams his hand on the table, but Mallory's not really surprised. She recoils, but she's not fully startled. And that's supposed to indicate to the audience that, the 2/3 of the iceberg beneath the water we're not seeing is actually, there's been a pretty abusive relationship that has developed, probably slowly, in a gradual way, where then people become used to it and start making excuses. And so it was also, we were really trying to play with the idea that, mental illness and the downward spiral that can lead to, and not dealing with your problems and not talking about these really powerful things that happen in your life, and how you can actually bring them into relationships, and it can start to now infect other people's lives, which is why we have the line in the film, trauma is a powerful force. It can slither its way into your life, infecting it and turning you into someone that you never intended on being. And these are things that are really important to deal with. And also, these are things that we feel Lovecraftian elders and these Cthulhu-like entities are able to exploit and actually get into people through these traumas and feed off that negative energy. So again, we really were inspired, as much as trying to make a real feeling kind of Blue Valentine film in a sense, as well as cosmic horror. And the last thing I'll say to that is, in one of the last scenes, which I won't reveal, but when Alex and Mallory are really having this climactic moment together, we all decided at this moment, forget this is a horror film, forget it's cosmic horror, forget that it's Lovecraft, and let the weight of the words and what you guys are saying speak for itself, and the horror will come through in that. And to me, it was one of the most powerful scenes, because it felt absolutely real, but totally tied in to the cosmic horror of the film that we establish.
Mm-hmm. It does really touch on the sort of deep time and like lineage, the heredity, and kind of the horrors that are in front of you, but then the horrors that you were sort of given unwillingly or unknowingly by just the fact of your parents doing some fucked up shit in their childhood.
Yeah.
Right?
We all feel that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Too real. Too real. It's more of a documentary than anything.
But it's interesting that you say that you told them just forget that it's a horror film, just play it out in real life, because like there's definitely a discomfort, like an uncomfortable like moment where you feel like you're watching something that you shouldn't be, like a private thing that you shouldn't be watching.
Well, and
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say something that we established pretty early on when we were figuring out like the way to shoot this film is that we wanted it to be represented visually. That Mallory progressively is hiding the camera as the story progresses. So at the very beginning, it's very much in Alex's face. He's always commenting on it. He's like, "Can you get the camera out of my face?" And as his behavior starts to worsen, she starts to place it further away. When they have lunch, she puts it on the counter. When they have their dinner together, she's hiding it behind two vases, whatever. And then in that scene, it's all the way in the other side of the room, and it's very much, and it's facing their backs. It's something that she doesn't want Alex to see whatsoever. So it was very intentional that we wanted the audience to then basically ask themselves, like, should we even be here? This seems really fucking wrong to be sitting in on this.
And it's very cool that you said that in terms of feeling like you were seeing something you weren't supposed to, because that then goes right back to the found footage. We really wanted the found footage to feel like you were watching very intimate moments of two people's relationships that you're not supposed to see, because again, this is all being documented apparently for the sleep therapist to see afterwards, to be able to have a proper diagnosis. So there's these, and then because Mallory's a documentarian in her profession, she has the camera rolling in these intimate moments as well. So then it allows this kind of window. It's not so much a God's eye view as the camera normally is in a straight narrative film, whereas this is actually very intentionally shot by the protagonist. And so it gives you these moments where you're like, don't know if I'm supposed to be seeing this, but I'm definitely strapped in and watching it because it's that real life drama. But yeah, so again, to your initial question about found footage, that was a big emotion we were trying to hit to kind of stoke in the viewers.
Yeah, it kind of feels like you're reading someone's diary.
Yeah,
you
totally.
know? Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. Are you guys found footage fans? Like, are there any films that you want to name drop that you were maybe influenced by when you were making this, or things that you had in mind? Like, I really liked how they did that thing. Maybe we should try that.
Absolutely. This is super cliche, but Blair Witch Project, what was so cool about that film was you take the witch away, you take all the lore, you take all the kind of supernatural horror. It's people lost in the woods, which is a terrifying idea, right? So that was a big jumping off point for us, as well as the pacing of the film, because we really liked how the film paced out, especially towards the first 2/3 of the film. It really moves and it keeps you engaged. So from a structure perspective, that was a big one. But movies like Cannibal Holocaust, like that, what was so cool about Cannibal Holocaust was it also was dissecting the nature of what you are watching. Should you be watching it, and should the world see this? So that was also because to me that's one of the most uncomfortable, because it's like a half found footage, half narrative film. But that's a film that really stokes discomfort in the viewer, not just from the grisly footage you're seeing, but the nature of like why the footage was shot, how they were actually manipulating the story to get something out that wasn't true, and perpetuating these atrocities. And then the people that are reviewing the footage going, should we put this out? And that's kind of where the idea of Mallory creating the doc in a kind of like kind of backhanded way of now exploiting Alex's parasomnia to actually create her next doc, since her first film we kind of inferred didn't do that well, wasn't really a film that many people saw. So now maybe she sees a story in Alex, but is that just his paranoia? Maybe it's not, because she ended up piecing the film together later. And that's where the available footage idea for us came. It was like, okay, so we start with a 911 call. Well, she had to get that somewhere, right? Then there's the footage from the Airbnb, which she wouldn't have had access to initially. She would have had to gather afterwards. So that's kind of that. Cannibal Holocaust was one I think that was very influential in that way. I don't know, you guys.
Yeah, I think too, like cliche answer, but like Paranormal Activity as well. You know what I mean? Like there's just some really good scares in there, and like kind of to what Jay was saying, like pacing as well. Yeah. What about you, Al? Anything?
Oh, I was going to say Paranormal Activity. It's simplicity. Like it's
Yeah.
clear of why the camera's being used. And that was something that we were very passionate about. when we were creating the story is it has to be clear on why she's shooting this thing, which is where those scenes that you feel you're not supposed to be seeing plays into the story of, does Alex have a point when he's accusing Mallory of being more opportunistic with his illness and shooting things that maybe she shouldn't be, so that she can build a story out? And so with Paranormal Activity, the stakes are very high, and they're very clear right off the bat, and that was what we wanted to establish with our movie as well. And I think that was probably my biggest one was and it's also has a very liminal approach. It's very comfortable just being on a tripod in the corner. We wanted that too. Okay, let's build out then the scene, and let's have the blocking and all of the things that fill the frame be interesting enough that the camera can sit there for 4 minutes while we argue, or that we can cut to black, and what we hear is interesting enough that the audience is actually scared and the tension is there.
Honorable mention too to Last Exorcism. That's really what gave us the idea to not have the protagonist operate the cameras at the camera at times, and that generated, in my opinion, one of our most interesting scenes. Mm-hmm. It's, when the girl that's possessed picks up the camera and she's now walking around with it. We were kind of like, okay, cool. Let's take that, let's spin it, and then let's kind of like switch ultimately what she finds with the camera. So then what Alex is doing with the camera. So yeah, that was definitely another big one for us.
Nice. I had a thought and then it went out of my head.
Hate those.
It was about when you were talking about Paranormal Activity and just the quiet moments. Yeah, so talk about the jump scares or lack of jump scares, because one of the things that makes, for me, Blair Witch Project so effective is the ending where, she comes around the corner and she sees Mike and he's just standing there, like he's not doing anything, like nothing happens, and then the camera falls over and you're like, what the fuck just happened? There was a couple of moments, especially in the crawl space, where Mallory kind of comes around the corner and there's just like there's no movement, but you realize there's something there, and it's kind of terrifying because you're not expecting it. But can you talk a little bit about the kind of philosophy behind when you decide to use jump scares and when you don't?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I think one thing we wanted to kind of do was really pace out like creeping dread. So we really wanted to have this thing where it felt like a movie you've seen, but it also doesn't feel like a movie you've seen. So you've got these long moments of anticipation where now you're kind of building it, you're kind of inflating the balloon, so to speak, and it's getting bigger and bigger, but then you don't pop it. And then the audience kind of like, oh, when's that gonna, and then it hits. So we were trying to almost kind of like syncopate the pacing in that way, where we were going like, here's a moment where we don't think people are anticipating a jump scare. Let's put a jump scare. In a moment that people think that we're actually building towards a jump scare, let's leave them in anticipation and cut to the next scene. So it was really trying to, in a way, like offset the kind of natural jump scare pacing that you would find. And then there was a couple key moments where we wanted to give the audience, okay, you're anticipating one here, we're going to give it to you here. But then it's just, when's it going to happen? So I think that was kind of one of the philosophies around it.
Yeah, like it's pretty much echoing what Jay said. And the crawl space scene is a great example. That scene was reshot. We went up and we did like 2 days, just like an even skeletoner crew of our already skeleton crew film, because the tension of that scene was not what it should be, and it rushed a little bit too much. It didn't really have that moment, like you're saying, of when you around the corner and you see that he's standing in the corner of the room, and letting that just exist as something terrifying. You're already in found footage. The audience is being represented by the main character, and so what they feel, and do I go, do I not? That tension was sort of zapped out of it. So it was very satisfying to be able to go and redo that scene and really put the tension, like try to max it out as much as possible in the film. Because another scene that was reshot that I really love for its use of no jump scare is the first night that they spend at the house, when Alex is just sitting up in bed and he's just talking to himself. That was something that was a totally different gag the first time that we did it. And we were like, no, that, like, I really want to feel something breathe here. And I just want to be creeped out. I want to have that feeling of if I just rolled over in bed and my partner was doing that, and just the stark sort of confusion that I would feel, but also like, oh my God, that's fucking creepy. So I'm really glad that you had those moments watching the film as well.
Also with Blair Witch, right? Because Blair Witch just, I feel, inflates that balloon constantly, and you're like, when is there going to be a jump scare? And when those like kids shake the tent, I've seen that movie 1,000 times. Every time I see that moment, I'm always just like, air goes right out of my lungs. You know what I mean? Like it's just, yeah. So yeah, Blair Witch was super cool for that.
I'm interested for Mallory because you are basically like you and the cinematographer were like living in each other's shorts. Did there come a point where you were so in Blair Witch, I mean, gosh, it was like the seminal found footage film, but they tell Heather like you're addicted to that thing. And I'm curious if you personally, as Mallory, not the character, ever got to a point where you just like wanted to be watching everything through the camera.
Good question.
So like me as the person, you're saying?
Yeah, like you as you, not the character.
Really good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't know. I mean, like it was I like in general, I always like these guys are usually the ones like operating the camera and I'm kind of just the one like peeking in, do you know what I mean? But it was interesting because there were points when we initially started filming where our DP was like, there are going to be moments when I give you the camera to actually operate. Because I think having your, novice like camera opping could actually like lend really, really well. And we tried it out on a couple scenes and it just wasn't really working. And I think for me, it was because it was almost like, again, not being a real actor, like acting and doing are hard when you're trying to do it together. And so it was very much, I was like, no, Mike, I think you need to do it. But, being in each other's shorts, so to speak, there were times where it was kind of like we would talk to each other before shooting something and being like, okay, like, in the scene where Mallory, like, she puts down the camera, walks in front, and then she puts on her shoes. Like, Mike and I were talking, and it was kind of was like, I feel like she would put it down here. Like, why would you walk with it, put your shoes on while you're carrying this camera kind of thing? And we would have conversations like that. But yeah, I don't know. So, like, maybe a little bit, I found it like interesting of like wanting to see things through the camera. But at the same time, I think I was also just really focused on like, being in the moment and like acting it out too and giving like Alex what he needed and also making it feel like there was someone real behind it as well. That
It's
makes
funny
sense.
because she's like the biggest people watcher too. So it's like
I do love people watching. Like if I'm going to a restaurant, like my back is going to be facing the wall so I can watch everybody.
She has made eye contact with me in 10 years.
Very nice. And I guess you weren't looking through the camera most of the time, but you had kind of a lot to handle, a lot of things to juggle.
Yeah.
And we're talking about how you were just kind of side by side with him. Like, how much complicated choreography did you have to do to get some of those shots?
Yeah, there were a few shots. I think the stairs we did like three or four times, I think. And then, there were a couple others too where we needed to like really choreograph like the scene where, she's like searching for Alex, like any searching scenes really, because like I'm behind Mike. So there's a lot of choreograph of like, okay, Mike, where are you gonna be so that I can find a space to like squeeze my body sort of thing. Because then, right after we did the take for camera, we went right into Foley right afterwards. So being able to know exactly where Mike was stepping to helped a lot with like our Foleying and everything as well. So there was a lot of choreography and it was basically me watching kind of like what he wanted to do and then trying to find the places in which I could like move with him and hide. And it's a tight cabin. Like we make it look, and I feel like a lot bigger than it actually is.
You guys were also doing it on ice too,
Yeah.
which was not easy.
And it was also important because because it was very important. We were very conscious of this for me to not be talking to the camera, but be talking to Mallory, because Alex's character doesn't want the camera on, so he's not going to acknowledge it as much if he's unimpressed with it. So it was important that while Mike was operating the camera and Mallory is tied to his hip, that her eye line is correct with where he is. So half the time I'm seeing like a sliver of Mallory, but we're still making eye contact because that's what it would be lined up. So she's like talking to the back of Mike's neck, and I'm talking through his head at the one eye that I can see of her, so that we can have this intense exchange. So it was a dance.
And
Yeah.
one thing we were really conscious too of doing was shooting from, because DP is taller than Mallory, so we were trying to shoot from Mallory's height. So it really does also feel like you are seeing from that perspective, which I thought was a very cool approach.
Nice. Did you, how loose were you with some of the dialogue? Was it mostly just following the script, or were there moments that you ad-libbed?
There's some,
there's definitely some ad-libbed, and like, you know, in the couple of scenes where like Alex and Mallory are by the fire and there's those funny moments, like Al just did things that weren't a part of the script that just made me genuinely and like naturally laugh, and like we kept a lot of that in. I feel like too, and like Al, I don't know if you felt this way, a lot of kind of like the ad-libbing and stuff kind of also came through table reads, which we would then kind of be like, oh, like, you know what, this feels way better to say it like this. And so we kind of almost did ad-libbing as like through table reads and changing stuff a little bit that way. But I'd say like a lot of the moments in which their relationship is like in those happy-go-lucky moments, those are probably, I think, a little bit more ad-libbed than the other ones. And it's just like us being like goofballs with one another, really.
Yeah, there was no real ad-libbing story points at all. Like, to Mallory's point, we would ad-lib shit in our table reads, and then we would be like, oh, that was actually good, and like Jay would jot it down to add into the script after. The only times that I ad-libbed in the movie is I'd say to Mallory before, I'm gonna fucking try to make you like laugh in this scene, and so I would just do shit without telling her. And like when I pulled my pants down when I'm dancing to the song, the first, and I fought hard to keep it in the movie, but Jay and Mal were like, no, I accidentally pulled my pants down way too far, and so much showed, and so it was, and then Mallory died laughing, and I loved the sound of her laughter, but we were all like, no, like that, this is a terrible visual to see. So there was a lot of just silly ad libs like that. And like when like the whole stump joke when we're in front of the fire and we're drinking wine or whatever, like those little facial expressions, I would switch them up every shot just to see if Mallory's reaction would be good. And yeah, so it's little goofy things like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, I know what the question was. So we should, I mean, we could talk for like as longer than the movie about the movie.
Oh, that was it for that.
We'll save it for somebody else's interview. So for those of you watching, probably after the fact, there's a Discord server. So if you have questions for Alex, Mallory, and Jay, you can ask them in the Discord server, or you could ask them on social media. Where can people find you, Alex?
You can find me Blind Luck Pictures, at Blind Luck Pictures is all three of our main hub to go to. So check us out there. And my personal one is I need to change it because this is getting so embarrassing saying the thing. It's Rich Damn Rich, and I'm not rich though. So that's the joke. Yeah.
And that's Instagram at Blind Luck Pictures on Instagram and Facebook, or
and Facebook is Blind Luck Pictures, and then you can check out our website at www.blindluckpictures.com.
Awesome. So one parting question is, has there been any popular media where you've seen something that you immediately related to something Lovecraftian that no one else did?
Oh, what a good question.
So
Well,
So I'll answer for you, give you an example.
yeah.
This is something that Brian and I talk about all the time. How, and it's going back to that, once you know Lovecraft, you see everything through that lens. So in that show, How I Met Your Mother,
Okay.
There's an episode where they talk about this burger place that used to be like around the corner, and that they went there and it was like the best burgers ever. But then I don't remember the exact points, but then they tried to go find it again and they could never find where it was. And we were immediately like, it's like the music of Aragon. We can never find
Yeah.
it. It's like the mythical burger place that they had one excellent night of like the best burgers in New York City, and then they could never find it again. So I'm always curious to know if there's other people that are Lovecraft fans that see these kinds of things, and like, you know,
That's
a great
really
example.
or there might not be one.
It's
okay if you can't think.
That sounds like a Benson and Moorhead like movie.
no, that's a really, really good question.
I was gonna say when they I think the giant squid is one of the most interesting things in the ocean. And I was reading this collection of short stories by David Grand, like short articles, I should say. And he followed a squid hunter for a while, and that immediately, like, I was like, what a Lovecraftian little 20-page essay this is. It's not as cool as the burger place, but that just immediately came to mind when you asked the question.
I don't know.
It's a really, really good question. Oh my god.
Okay, post it on your Instagram when you think about it.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
Now you got me just wanting to see like the binary, like the matrix in it all, right? Where it's just like, oh yeah, that's a really good question. God damn. Yeah, you stumped me on that.
Okay.
As soon as we hang up this call, there's gonna be so many answers.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
We're gonna be like, oh no.
So we do have a Discord server as well, and I think for people watching, that URL's probably somewhere at the bottom. But the bit.ly is bit.ly/HPLFF Discord. And if you go to that link, it will just automatically give you the invite. You can enjoy, and you can join the chat. There's people in there right now. Not a ton of activity, but you can go in there and post things and talk to each other and see what the audience reaction was to your films.
I think I got an answer.
Okay.
I think I'd say it was Devil's Candy. It was like the music of Eric Zahn. That was one that I felt was very, it felt super Lovecrafty. You know what I mean? That Sean Byrne, I think it was a Sean Byrne film.
It was Sean Byrne,
yeah. That for me was a movie that when I saw, I was like, oh, this feels like a Lovecraft movie that's not Lovecraft. Yeah, I would say that.
Okay. Awesome. Good answers. Thank you, Jay, Mallory, Alex, for taking time to be with me. I know it's very late for you because you're on like 3 hours ahead of us.
Anytime.
So
Anytime we're here.
I appreciate it, and I know our audience appreciates it, and it was like fantastic meeting you guys. We will keep an eye out for what's next from you, and
Absolutely.
hope to see features, more Lovecraftian features from you in the future.
Oh, the next one's going to be Lovecrafty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one's pretty wild.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you as well. Thank you for having us.